Corbyn declares war on the city, Labour leader agrees that he is a threat to bankers if he is elected. Jeremy Corbyn yesterday declared war on Britain's valuable banking sector, agreeing with critics that he is a threat to the industry if elected Prime Minister. The Labour leader singled out Wall Street lender Morgan Stanley after it warned that his hard-left policies would be catastrophic for the economy and were more dangerous than the risks from Brexit. Mr. Corbyn took aim at Morgan Stanley chief executive James Gorman, who lives in New York. He said, "Nurses, teachers, shop workers, builders, just about everyone is finding it harder to get by." While Morgan Stanley's CEO paid himself £21.5 million last year and UK banks paid out £15 billion in bonuses. Labour is a growing movement of well over 500,000 members and a government in waiting that will work for the many. When they say we're a threat, they're right. We're a threat to a damaging and failed system that's rigged for the few. Bankers like Morgan Stanley should not run our country, but they think they do. Many campaigners rail against sky-high pay in the city, but it is nonetheless a global powerhouse which rakes in huge sums for the Treasury. Financial services firms paid a record £72.1 billion in taxes during the year to March 31, 11% of the total given to the Exchequer. Earlier this week, Morgan Stanley analysts said, for the UK market, domestic politics may be perceived as a bigger risk than Brexit. The hard-left Momentum Group is poised to take control of its first town hall after a purge of moderate Labour councillors. Jeremy Corbyn's grassroots movement has ousted councillors in North London's Haringey and replaced them with more left-wing candidates. It means that, after May's local elections, the far left could have a controlling majority, and challenge for leadership of the council, which has a £693 million budget. 9 councillors were ousted and others said they would stand down after being targeted. Councillor Barbara Blake said they felt intimidated by ruthless attacks. But a Momentum source denied a coup within the Labour Party and said that the changes had been driven by anger against the council's housing policy. From a UK investor perspective, we believe that the domestic political situation is at least as significant as Brexit, given the fragile state of the current government and the perceived risks of an incoming Labour administration that could potentially embark on a radical change in policy direction. The bank said utility companies, especially in the water and power sectors, were most at risk from a Labour government, but postal services, telecommunications and travel firms could also be affected. Former Northern powerhouse Minister Andrew Percy said of Mr. Corbyn's comments, "This is really worrying given how much tax financial services provide to the UK, tax that is used to pay for our doctors, nurses and teachers. We already know Labour would raise taxes for the many, now we know they also plan to threaten the jobs of ordinary workers in the city." Mr. Corbyn also said the banks were responsible for the 2008 recession, although opponents blame years of overspending by Labour which meant the coffers were bare when the economy turned. He said, "These are the same speculators and gamblers who crashed our economy in 2008. And then we had to bail them out. Their greed plunged the world into crisis and we're still paying the price, because the Tories used the aftermath of the financial crisis to push through unnecessary and deeply damaging austerity." Mr. Corbyn's attack on the city comes after an election campaign in which he pledged to introduce a Robin Hood tax on the city, an effective £26 billion tax rate. The tax on financial transactions would see 0.5% of the value of bonds and derivatives going to the Treasury, but critics warn it would hit pensioners and savers just as much as bankers. Mr. Corbyn, whose comments are likely to damage efforts by Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell to improve the party's relations with the city, also attacked Morgan Stanley for having close ties to the Tories, even though former Labour Chancellor Alistair Darling has been a board member since 2015.